Hello guys, and welcome to NIGHTBOUND. This channel is a place where real experiences are told slowly and honestly, without exaggeration. Before we begin, if you've ever had an experience that still stays with you, something you can't fully explain, you're welcome to share it in the comments. Some of those stories will be told here. Tonight's story comes from a real experience that was shared with us. The person involved asked to remain anonymous, so names and certain details have been changed. At first, this story doesn't feel unusual. Nothing about it seems strange. But as it goes on, small details begin to stand out, and by the end, it becomes clear that something was never right. Take a moment, get comfortable, and listen carefully. This is NIGHTBOUND. It's not a story about an accident, and it's not about a technical mistake. This is a journey that in the end left behind more questions than answers. A story that took place on one of Indonesia's mountains and was experienced firsthand by those involved. Now, let's listen to a real mountain climbing story titled The Final Promise at the Summit of Sumbing. Early 2021. A journey began that would defy the laws of the living. Mas Oji, an experienced climber, received a message from his friend Aldo. The mission? The Triple S: Slamet, Sindoro, and Sumbing. The group was small, just 5 people. But there was a newcomer, a man named Bagus. He was added to the group chat just 2 days before they left. Bagus was no stranger to the group's core. He was Echo's closest friend. For 5 years, they had worked together and lived together. They were like brothers. Bagus was ready to hike. He was ready to complete the mission. But what the group didn't know was that Bagus shouldn't have been there at all. Because 2 days before the climb, Bagus was already dead. January 2nd. The group arrived at the Gajah Mungkur base camp. As Oji was parking his motorcycle, the atmosphere shifted. A base camp officer approached him, looking confused. The officer asked, "Why are you just getting here now? Your friend has been waiting since early this morning." Oji was stunned. It didn't make sense. The Gajah Mungkur route was brand new. It wasn't even on Google Maps yet. On top of that, Bagus had never set foot on this mountain before. How could he have found his way there alone, so early? When they finally met, Oji reached out and shook Bagus's hand. At that moment, everything felt normal. Bagus looked like his usual self. Thin, with a mustache and straight hair. They sat together and shared a meal. 5 men sharing 3 packs of nasi magono, the specialty of Wonosobo. They laughed and ate. A group of friends preparing for a climb. But they couldn't leave just yet. Local customs forbade climbing on Friday mornings. So they waited. And it was only after the Friday prayers that they finally stepped onto the trail, unaware that the man walking beside them was a shadow of who he used to be. Strange signs began to appear as they prepared to leave. Before the journey started, Oji watched Bagus performing wudu, the ritual ablution. But something was wrong. As the water poured, it did not seem to wet his skin at all. His hands were dry instantly. Later, while praying together at Terminal Pradana before entering the trail, the others raised their hands in prayer. But Bagus, he only looked down in a heavy, hollow silence. Throughout the climb, a cold sense of unease settled deep in Oji's heart. At post 1, during the Ashar prayer, Oji was prostrating on the ground. Through the corner of his eye, he saw Bagus, who had been sitting right beside him, suddenly move to a completely different spot. It was unnatural, a movement no human could make so silently and so fast. That night, they set up camp at Watu Talang. Bagus grew even more distant, refusing to eat, and speaking only in brief, cryptic whispers to echo. Then came the water. Oji prepared a drink with water that had just finished boiling. It was scalding hot. Bagus took it and drank it immediately as if it were nothing. When Oji asked, "Is it hot?" Bagus simply replied, "It's cold." Yet when Oji touched the glass, it was still burning to the touch. The night did not bring rest. Oji woke up twice to the freezing mountain air. Both times he looked beside him and found Bagus's sleeping bag empty. Oji searched the campsite and found him. Bagus was sitting alone in the crushing darkness at the Gaja Munkar entrance gate. He wasn't moving. He was just staring blankly into the distance, watching the city lights, like a ghost trapped between two worlds.
The next morning, the air was thin as they made their final push for the summit. They reached the peak, but the joy of the achievement was overshadowed by Bagus's behavior. He refused to take a single photo with the group. Instead, he sat alone, motionless, on a small stone that looked like an ancient shrine. It was then that Oji saw it. Bagus's face had changed, drastically. It wasn't just tired, it had turned a deathly bone-white pale. There was no color left in his skin, as if the blood had stopped flowing long ago. During the descent, the energy shifted. Bagus suddenly began to run. He moved down the mountain with a terrifying speed, so fast that the others could barely keep him in sight. When they finally caught up to him, he was clutching his stomach, complaining of excruciating pain. He looked at Oji and said, "This is my last climb with you, Mas." Oji forced himself to stay positive. He told himself it was just exhaustion, just the mountain air playing tricks on his mind. When they reached the base camp, Bagus didn't linger. He didn't even rest. He immediately said his goodbyes and claimed he was heading home first on his motorcycle. He vanished down the road in an instant. A few moments later, Oji met a local villager who had just climbed up from the path below. Oji asked if he had seen a man on a motorcycle passing by. The villager looked at him with a blank expression and said, "I've been on this road for a long time, and I haven't passed a single soul going down."
On the way back to Purwokerto, something strange happened again. The motorcycles ridden by Oji and his friends seemed to be mysteriously guided. Without realizing it, they had drifted far off their path, getting lost until they found themselves in the town of Porwarejo. It was Bagoose's hometown. Since they were already there, they thought, why not stop by? They wanted to check on their friend who had left the base camp so abruptly. As they turned into the small alley leading to Bagoose's house, the air grew still. Their hearts sank. Floating in the wind was a yellow flag, the universal sign of mourning. Then they heard it, the sound of tahlilan, the rhythmic prayers for the deceased, echoing from inside the house. Bagoose's younger brother stepped out. As soon as he saw Echo, he didn't say a word. He just collapsed into Echo's arms, sobbing hysterically. The confusion in the group turned into a cold, paralyzing fear. And then, in that small, crowded house, the bitter reality was finally revealed. The family spoke through their tears, and the words they said chilled Oji to the bone. Bagoose was gone. He had been hit by a car while he was out, buying the very supplies for this climb. He had died 2 days before the group ever met at the base camp. He never made it to the mountain, or so they thought. But then came the most terrifying realization of all. Oji looked at the logistics the figure of Bagoose had carried throughout the hike. Every item, every snack, every piece of gear. It was identical. It was exactly the same as the handwritten list found in the room of the deceased. The man who had climbed with them, the man who had shared their food and walked their path, was carrying the supplies of a dead man. He had come back just to finish what he started. Weeks passed, but the shadows of that climb refused to leave Oji's mind. He couldn't accept it. He needed proof. So he returned to the Gajamunkor base camp. He opened the registration book, his hands trembling as he flipped through the pages. And there it was, Bagoose's name, written in clear ink. Even more impossible, his physical ID card was still there, sitting in the storage box, left as a guarantee for a journey he was never supposed to take. A week later, Bagoose came to Oji one last time, but this time it was in a dream. He didn't look pale or broken. He looked neat, healthy, and at peace. No injuries, no pain. Bagoose looked at Oji, a gentle smile on his face, and spoke his final words. "Thank you for accompanying me, Mas. I have kept my promise to Echo. I have finished the Triple S." In that moment, Oji finally understood. The figure they had climbed with, the silent man who drank boiling water and left no footprints, was not a ghost meant to haunt them. It was a soul so loyal that even death could not stop him from fulfilling a final promise to his best friend. The mission was complete. Bagoose was finally home. That was the story. A journey that began like any other climb and ended with questions that never fully found answers. Some experiences don't come to frighten us, but to remind us that there are things we don't always understand. If you've ever had a similar experience or a story that still stays with you, you're welcome to share it in the comments. Thank you for spending your time with NIGHTBOUND. Until next time, stay aware and take care.